be recording this, so if someone is not able to see this session, then we will make the recording available on YouTube so you can get caught up. It'll be mostly slideshow. I do have a video in the middle to kind of give an illustration of what the beeps and boops sound like and what the real equipment looks like. We use our equipment because we're in the green industry. We use our equipment mostly for the demonstration type stuff, but in a case of something like this where we have valves being found with wire trackers, if you have an old Greenleaf 521, it'll work also for this. There are some feature differences between some of these products, but in general, the technology is the same for this application, finding valves. So that having been said, the meeting protocol here, we don't have microphones open for everybody. If there are folks that have questions, I'd appreciate it if you would send me a question using the chat bar or question bar on the right-hand side. You're also welcome to send me an email that I can reply to at jcarefoote@armadatech.com. So I have some addresses for you, internet addresses a little later in the slideshow, so you'll be able to see those then. But I'm here, as it turns out, our headquarters is in Michigan. I'm in Phoenix, and today is the opening day of the Phoenix Open and Waste Management Golf. I think they had 120,000 people show up yesterday at the TPC course in Scottsdale, and it's raining like crazy today. So I think it'll be down a little bit, but it's also Super Bowl weekend here, so there are millions of people on hand. Raining, which is unusual for here. But let's get in here and talk about what we came to talk about. The wire trackers that you may have used in the past, and the one that's in the picture here is our Pro 800D. It's the most popular one that we sell, and it has a number of features, but it's a wire tracker that is typically what I would call a magnetic type wire tracker. You put a current on a wire, and it allows you to track it, the path of the wire, using the antennas in the wand. The wand is the yellow stick that you see there. So you can follow the path of buried wires with this thing, and you can also use it to identify valve boxes or find lost valve boxes or identify them, which is why we call these things wire and valve locators. They have both of those functions, especially useful in irrigation and green maintenance. So having said that, now we wanted to say that in troubleshooting, it's possible to get by without a locator, but not sooner or later you kind of need one. And in this case, especially if you've lost valves. Valve boxes have been covered with grass or with landscape rock or mulch, something like that. This little diagram we show here is part of our troubleshooting training on finding problems in multi-wire irrigation systems. And it's kind of a tree, so you try this and you check that, and then you do these things. And the yellow boxes that I show there are the cases where you need to have a locator. If you go through here and you know where all the valve boxes are and you kind of know where the wires go, you don't need a locator for that. You can actually go to the valve boxes and start troubleshooting if you have water that's always on or water that's never on, or the usual kinds of things you're chasing. But in any case, you almost always need to have a wire and valve locator. In this case, we're going to talk about finding valves with it. And what this usually means is finding the path of the wire. And the conventional way of using a locator is to start up at the controller and the clock and connect your wires at the top there with a ground stake, and then just start wig-wagging your way out across the grass following the wire until you hear the very loud signal that goes along with the valve. And that is the most common way of doing these things, and not always absolutely necessary. We have two approaches that we wanted to discuss a little bit here today. One I call balanced and one unbalanced methods of doing the tracing. Once again, that's electronic geek terms, so you don't have to remember those terms, but we're going to talk about the most conventional and then an interesting trick. What we're really doing here is we're not finding valves. What we're doing is trying to locate valves and valve boxes by tracking down the valve solenoid. The valve solenoid is the little coil that's mounted on the top of a valve. When it's activated with a 24-volt signal from the clock, it ports some water around behind the diaphragm and causes the valve to flow, water to flow through the valve. But this is a handy trick for us because these valve solenoids are located wherever valves are found, except for master valves, things like that. So we're going to use that trick to find things. In this case, of course, in the multi-wire systems, there is a common wire that goes to every valve solenoid out there in the field, and then an individual trigger wire that goes to each of the valves in turn, which allows the controller then to turn them on according to the clock programming. And so we have these valve boxes with valves in them, typically distributed through an area, and they're letting water into zones. And if everything's cool and everything's programmed right, then you don't have to do much. But sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes the valve stops operating. Sometimes it won't stop operating, and you need to locate it and figure out what's going on. So having said that, we have what we're really doing is finding the valve box here so that you can continue to do any kind of maintenance. And that maintenance may be checking if the solenoids work, if the valve's firing, manually open the valve to find out if water's flowing, if the diaphragm's okay, or if you have to repair the valve. That's all down in the valve box. So finding the valve box is our main mission today. And there are normal approaches to this, some of which you may have used before, but we think of them as having basically two steps to it. The most common way is to go to the controller or clock and hook yourself up to the wire there and start tracking the wire out into the field, and then when you follow the wire and it's not broken or something's wrong with it, you follow the wire down and you get near a valve and you hear a very strong signal indicating you found a valve. That's a great quick way of doing it. Most of us start out doing that, especially since people are very often inheriting a landscaping system or irrigation system, and no one left them instructions about how many valve boxes there are, where the valves are, which zones are covering what. You have to map it out, and this is probably the best way to do it is number one here. Just track the wire and try to find valves on the end of it. If a wire is broken, what you'll do, you will never find the valve itself at the end. You'll find the signal peters out somewhere along the way. And that is an indication that the wire may be broken, and you can start into troubleshooting that. But the second issue is that when you're doing that kind of tracking, and you may find numbers of tracks of wires, and because they're close together and they're running in a trench for a while, and the signal bleeds over. You're always trying to use the locator in the lowest power setting to begin with, so that it doesn't bleed over. But you sometimes get multiple indications, meaning that you may go along tracking a wire and you find, oh, I've got a hot spot and there's a valve here, and then you go down, you keep following, and there's some more signal going on, and there's another valve you find. So the signals are bleeding over, and it's hard to tell the difference between them. So this is where step number 2 comes in, which I think is an interesting trick that's not always used. It's to verify that you have the target valve, and that means going into what I call balance mode, unclipping the wire from the ground stake and connecting it to the common wire, and I'll describe that again in a minute. The third thing that sometimes comes up is when you find that valve box, guess what? There are 2, 3, or 4 valves in the box, and sometimes you need to identify which one is which. There's some tricks for that. That's not our main topic today, but I've got a slide on it that I'm going to just touch on ways of sorting out which valve switch inside the manifold or inside the box. So here's our locating scenario. We've got a situation where we want to track out to a valve box, or maybe going down the road, tracking zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, but in any case, we're trying to find one. So when you hook up the transmitter, you put a stake down in the dirt on one side, and connect it with the black wire, and connect the red wire to the zone you're trying to trace, being careful to disconnect common wire, because we leave that off to the side in this case. Excuse me. This is what I call the unbalanced connection mode, because you're tracing the wire, you're putting the hot wire on the wire you're going to trace, and you're putting the other wire into the dirt. So what we're doing is creating a signal that's going out down the wire, giving us a nice tight path to follow, and then we're drawing the rest of the signal back from the wire through the ground in a diffuse way, so we have a good path to work with. Here's what really has to be done, what's going on. When you're putting that transmitter on the wires and into the ground on the one side, you're creating a loop. The signal, the current from the transmitter, the audible current, is flowing out through this wire and kind of spreading out into the ground and going all the way down as far as the valve box, and then kind of coming back through the earth. If you have this loop going on, you will get a good locate. If you have a situation where all of us have been there, you try to locate, and after 10 feet you don't find any more signal, or you never can find a signal, period. This is usually due to that ground stake that we're putting in the ground, because we haven't failed to create this loop that I'm showing here. You can make sure that ground stake is planted properly, it's in a decent place. If you're having trouble getting signal, or you're getting too much signal, you can move that ground stake even off to the other side of the wire, move it around a little bit till you get a good trace going on. Here in Arizona, we very often have trouble even getting the ground stake into the dirt. It's probably true of some other places in the country, but sometimes carry a water bottle with me just for that kind of thing, because I can't get it into the dirt. I have to create a wet spot and I get the stake down into the dirt and make sure it's wet and it's got a good electrical connection, because you typically don't have to go down more than an inch or two and you have moist earth where there is and this loop begins to work. But as long as you get this loop going, you will get a good locate. And this is sort of what's happening here. We're putting that unbalanced signal on between the earth and the one wire that we're interested in, and it's producing a signal all around the wire. So as we walk down the path with our antenna wand, sweeping back and forth like a metal detector, we can hear the signal, and I'll play a video so you get a chance to hear how this signal sounds in our unit. And you can wigwag your way, as I call it, along following the path of the wire until you reach a very loud signal, which is a sign that you have come to a valve. Now, the valve solenoid is the thing that's making that very loud tone, and but it's a sign that the valve box is there. And this is the unbalanced connection mode that we most commonly use. What happens very often, though, is we have a lot of wires laying loose in the trench, or even jacketed wires. They're very tight and close together, and the tracing signal kind of jumps onto adjacent wires, and you start to follow paths that are, not the main path. You may even get a couple of valves to light up. I've had this happen before, where you're going along and say, oh, here's a valve, and you keep on going, oh, there's another valve. The chances are they're not actually wired together. They're actually just talking magnetically to each other. So you get these two hot spots, and you want to know which one is the one that you were really trying to trace. Now, that's where we get into this mode that I call the balanced connection. The balanced connection, the second mode, is where we take the lead out of the ground and connect it to the other wire. And that way we have the two black and red leads connected to common and to the traced zone wire. And this causes, as you can see in the diagram here, one of the connected solenoid to bloom and cause the signal, and the other signals all fade away. When you're connected to the two wires like this, you won't get any tone over the path of the wire anymore, and you won't have a lot of valves lighting up, just the one that you're targeting. You can even start in this mode if you don't care where the wires go. You know where the boxes are. You just want to identify, well, what's zone 1? So you hook it up in the balance mode up to the zone 1 wire, and you walk around and see which valve box has got the big signal. Okay, that's zone 1. And in that case, if they're close by and you know where they are, you don't have to follow the path. Because in this case, when you're connected in the balance mode, you won't hear anything along the path of the wire. So we're back to this mode where, first of all, you can do tracing, starting in the unbalanced mode, starting up at the clock, follow the wire out, find the solenoids, find the valve boxes, and if you're having trouble distinguishing between them, you've got a couple of boxes lit up, you can switch to the mode 2, which is balanced connection, where we connect the ground stake. Instead of connecting to the ground stake, we now connect to the common lead. So what I'm going to do here is switch over and play you a little video that we use from our YouTube site, and we have a number of really useful YouTube videos, including instructions on how to use a locator. Basically, if you have or have rented, or if you rent out a Pro 800D from us, for example, there's a little YouTube video in 10 minutes that says, here's how you unbox it, here's how you hook it up, and here's how you track a wire. Those things are available there, but also shorter videos like the one that I have here. If you bear with me, I'll just bring this up, and the video may be a little jerky because of the internet, but the sound should be pretty good. This illustrates both modes. Hello. Okay, I am seeing some attendee questions here that are suggesting that the audio is not working, although I show it working from here. I hope everyone can hear me. We had a problem with this the first session this morning. I'm just checking some of my little chat. Yeah. Okay, I'm just checking because I'm a little. I always try to check and make sure we don't have audio and video problems. It shows okay, but so I'm going to carry on here, presuming that everyone can see and hear properly. Anyway, to recap, as Bruce was saying in the video, and as I discussed before, at the top here, when a clock is operating in its normal mode, it is the zone wires are connected, the common wires connected, everything's to the field, and now the clock is turning valves off and on with its 24-volt signals according to the timer. When we're needing to kind of troubleshoot or locate things, we go to the clock and lift the common line and the trace line we're after off the clock and connect it in an unbalanced mode between the ground stake and the tracked wire, and then we're then putting a tracing current down the wire, and we can follow the wire out into the field and even find valves. If we're trying to narrow down the valve that we're after, we take the line off the ground stake and connect it to the common wire. The common wire is then connected with the other wire in a balanced mode, and the only signal that you hear will be the valve that it's connected to. Very useful kind of a trick. The other thing that I mentioned that sometimes comes to light is when you found something and there are multiple valves in the same box and you need to identify one of the valves, there are some things you can do. You can use our Pro 48 irrigation system tester, as shown there in the box with the hand yellow box near the clock box. You can connect it in a tracing mode where you're able to send a tone down the wire to one of the valves that you're after and use a tone probe as seen there to identify which signal is strongest and therefore which valve it is. You can connect it in the chatter mode, which causes the valve to open and close rapidly, in which case you can identify it physically by the clacking sound that it makes. Very easy, handy way of identifying among valves. You can even use that chattering noise to help locate the valve box if it's quiet. Some people do that. They put it in the chatter mode and walk around trying to hear the click-clack. Besides that kind of a tester, going way down to the inexpensive end of things, there are things shown on the left, down the lower left there for identifying valves called clickets, buzzbees, chatterbox, various little gadgets you can buy in a lot of irrigation distributor houses that are less than $40 or even $30 and allow you to connect between the valve wire and the clock and fire the clock, and it makes the valve buzz. That can be a handy way. You'll see a lot of those things in people's toolboxes. So one caveat I should put here is that when we're talking about finding valves, we're talking about a conventional multi-wire irrigation system where the valves are literally wired to the main control cables and all the way back to the clock. In the situation where you have two-wire irrigation systems, the valves are hidden from the main wires by a decoder. Decoder keeps the valve solenoid from lighting up and making a good signal, so it is not a useful technique with two-wire systems. That's another topic. Next week we have a session on the difference between two-wire and conventional irrigation systems, so that you'll be able to see these differences a little more clearly. It is possible to locate the path of a two-wire irrigation system, just not the valves. In the case of the two-wire, we use it only in the unbalanced mode on two-wire because the voltages that are put out by the locator could potentially damage things like decoders. So we are able to locate the path, but not to find the valves in a two-wire system. This is something that we want people to be aware of. So next week we will be talking about this. For example, the differences between multi-wire and two-wire irrigation systems. You need some different tools, and we will cover that briefly just to let people know. Some people already are having to work on these systems. Some have never worked on two-wire, which is a popular system, especially for widespread, far-flung irrigation systems from golf courses to parks to some other situations, business parks, where literally a local area network is built to operate the valves in the field. And you need some things like that meter shown there, the clamp meter, milliamp clamp meter, to help identify problems. So something that you need to know about. Again, some things you should know about is our YouTube channel, ARMADA Tech, is available on the YouTube channel. You can search for that. There's a band by the name of ARMADA Tech. I don't know where that comes from, but you might see that there. But you can find our channel pretty readily if you go there and search for ARMADA Tech. There are a bunch of videos on there, some of them relatively short, like the one I showed in the middle of this morning's presentation, and a 10 or 12-minute video showing you how to unbox and operate a Pro 800, which is useful for people that don't do it very frequently. You can pull it up on your smartphone if you need to. So our home site, of course, is www.armadatech.com. You can see our data sheets and manuals and other things are available for download there. Some of our training videos. Most of the videos are, the most complete set is up on YouTube because it's easiest for people to reach and keep operated. We have a blog at armadaupdate.wordpress.com. Use that to put some application notes and other information out there. I have a little quick cheater card for our inexpensive meter that shows you how to set the meter for reading, doing kinds of common electrical measurement tasks. Covered that in another webinar. That is downloadable from there, and we'll have a link on the blog to the YouTube video of this session, for that matter. So that is our presentation for this morning. We always try to keep it under 30 minutes. You're welcome to email me any questions. I hope everybody's been able to see and hear the presentation this morning. This is fairly new for us within the last week or so, trying to get our webinars up and operating in a way that everybody can reach them and see them properly, and we hope it's working that way. So thanks again for joining us this morning. Our session next week is at both 7:30 and 9:30 Mountain Standard Time next Friday on the difference between two-wire and conventional irrigation. We'd like to see you there if you're able to join us. We have other sessions on using automatic clamp meters coming up, and ground fault locating and troubleshooting irrigation controllers of the type we talked about today. So thanks for joining us.